Fear of abduction and unidentified hovercraft are proof that not only did aliens exist on Duskmourn before the Ascension, but there was also a system of government similar to our own that most likely worked together with the aliens to fight off Valgaroth. What we know about pre-House Duskmourn is that it was a world populated by humans and elves that had a somewhat similar amount of technological developments as the United States did during the 1980s. We know that there were high schools, there were bullies, there were toasters, there was magic, lighters, ghosts, cars, demonic summonings, cul-de-sacs, and cities. When Marina Vendrell brought her bullies to Valgaroth, the two of them entered into a contract together. In exchange for turning those poor girls into a fine paste, Valgaroth was able to start expanding his boundaries. He started first with the two houses next door to them, then expanded into the whole neighborhood, and then into the whole cities, and then so on and so forth, until the whole world became nothing but the house. As Valgaroth started to hunt the people inside the house, one of the things that he developed were things that we know as fear ofs, which are represented with different enchantment creatures in Duskmourn. Typically, fear of creatures have some sort of visual representation as to what they are. So for example, fear of being hunted is some sort of predator creature stalking the halls. Fear of failed tests, however, has a bunch of papers swirling around it, and what I only assume is a bloody quill. Fear of lost teeth, importantly, has a dental chair in it. And fear of abduction has a gray alien in it. I didn't open a copy of Fear of Abduction or any of the stuff that Wizards sent me, so here's a copy. Here's what it looks like. Now, to preface, everything that I'm about to say, I've done no research on. This stuff is psychotic. I don't want the CIA agent that monitors my internet search history to be too worried about me. I love you too much, Barry. So keep that in mind with everything that I'm about to say. In 1960, the United States government entered into an agreement with a society of intergalactic creatures known as the Greys, something that we would recognize as a classic alien design. They're called the Greys because, that's right, they're gray, but there are other kinds of aliens, but I don't want to talk about them. And I've already killed enough of your brain cells to send you back to the 11th grade with that previous sentence, so let's just move on. The deal the US government and the aliens entered into was essentially, in exchange for incredibly advanced technology that the US government was able to reverse engineer into things such as cell phones and the internet, the aliens would then be allowed to abduct US citizens and perform experiments on them. These abductions are where all of our, alien horror media comes from, like E.T., that's not really a horror movie, whatever, E.T., Close Encounters of a Third Kind, and X-Files. Anyways, all of that is crazy. We just need to establish some sort of pre-context for the rest of this conversation. Now, we can get back to things that actually matter, Magic the Gathering. First of all, we have to assume that Marina Vendrell went to a public high school. We know that she went to high school just based on her age, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that she went to a public high school because of how much horror media has kids going to public high schools in the 1980s America. I also don't think that she went to a private high school because even though her family was able to afford a horseless carriage, you don't buy the haunted house at the end of the street if you're well off enough to send your kid to private high school. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to assume that if there are publicly funded high schools, that means that there's some sort of governing body, and if there's a governing body, that governing body can make agreements with aliens. My thinking is that the pre-House government and the pre-House aliens had an agreement similar to the one that I described earlier, civilians for technology, and this technology is where all that 1980s stuff shows up from. Things like the cars that were in Marina's neighborhood, but also things like the toaster that was found in one of the side stories of Duskmourn, and most importantly, the unidentified hovercraft. Pre-House technology existing within the house is actually quite common, not just with things like haunted screen or glimmerlight, but also with things like fear of missing teeth. There's a dental chair in there. Why does that need to be there? I don't think Valgaroth is doing dental exams on his subjects. Now, an important thing to know about the cosmology of Duskmourn before Valgaroth took over is that there were two suns. There was a greater sun and a lesser sun. And during the Ascension, the way that Valgaroth took the greater sun is that he willed a giant tower to be constructed that had a window at the top of it. And the window opened, and then it shut. And when it shut, the sun was gone. I don't think it's a stretch to assume that a being that is able to do that would be able to wipe out a bunch of aliens that existed on this plane. Now, of course, we don't have that much text to go off of for what happened during the Ascension. There's maybe a handful of flavor texts, and there's one story article, but that's at the tail end of the Ascension and focuses on the elves. I don't think it's that far of a reach to not only understand that there was a governing body that worked with aliens to have some sort of trade agreement, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that they were also fighting against Valgaroth, which I would have loved to read about. Now, if you look at the showcase art for Unidentified Hovercraft, you'll see that there's a lot of glitch ghost effects going on in the art. This is typically reserved for things that have died outside the house and whose spirits are trying to claw their way back in through reflective surfaces. I believe this artwork is proof that not only did aliens exist on Duskmourn, but they fought against Valgovath's ascension and were killed outside the house and are trying to break their way back in through the reflective surfaces. Now, you could argue that all of the showcase frames on Duskmourn have that sort of glitch ghost effect to it, but none as much as unidentified hovercraft, except for ghostly dancers who are in fact glitch ghosts. So in summary, because we can see proof of both pre-house aliens in the artwork on the showcase frame of unidentified hovercraft, and we can see proof of their technology still existing in the house in the standard frame of unidentified hovercraft, and we can see that the concept of what these aliens look like can still manifest itself through fear of abduction, we can safely assume that there were aliens on this plane, regardless of whether or not the regular citizens knew about it. These aliens and whatever governing body existed on Duskmourn, in my mind, definitely worked together to try and stop Valgovath's ascension. They failed horribly, as we can plainly see, but I think that's such a cool little detail that exists in just a few amount of cards. It makes my brain think. Now, does any of that mean anything to anyone other than me? Probably not, but I have been nonstop thinking about this ever since Fear of Abduction and Unidentified Hovercraft were previewed, and then Wizards sent me a box of product. That's why I'm holding this right now, and I cannot get this stupid thought out of my mind, so I had to make this video. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry if you're dumber now.